looking at where the step is, and I'm thinking, I have to go around all that way, so it's probably easier. I like shortcuts, you see. I'm one of those people that doesn't like queues and things like that. If I'll find the shortest queue, the shortest way, and so on all the time. Sometimes it gets me into trouble. But you're all very welcome. Welcome back to this afternoon's program. We're very happy that you stayed behind. I can see some of us have gone home. Maybe others are still on their way. But those of us that have stayed here, you're very welcome, and we're so grateful that we've enjoyed yet another day of fellowshipping together. You know, there's nothing as great as being with your brothers and sisters, right? That's why David says, come, let us go together to the house of the Lord, because that's where we find great joy. These are the best people to be with in the world. I know sometimes we forget that. But, you know, family is the best place. And family, we are a family together. And when we can spend a day together, it's wonderful because we don't get a chance to do that too often. So we're so glad that you stayed behind. And I know the Lord has prepared a great feast. After the feast that we had earlier, we have an even better feast right now for the mind. And I know we're going to leave this place enriched in more ways than one. Now, Robin was saying to me, let's get them active. And Cheryl is the active, you know, Cheryl was here with She's with the kids, and she gets you all running and so on. We're going to do a bit of a stretch because I know we've eaten. The food needs to go down a little and so on, so you don't fall asleep because it's pretty warm in here. So I'm going to ask you to just stand up. Right? And take a deep breath. So breathe in through your nose and just out. Right? Breathe in again. Take a deep breath. And breathe out. And stretch. Just all the way up. Reach for the ceiling. Stretch all the way up. Yeah, reach for heaven. Right? All the way up. And then we're going to bend down and touch your toes. Yeah, this is the best part. Touch your toes. Now, I didn't hear the children complaining when they were doing this part, right? Now, we adults are so flexible. We love to do that. Let's stretch again. All the way up. Yeah, up, all the way. And then we're going to stretch down and just touch your toes. Yeah. Very good. Now, you're all smiling, right? Great. So have a seat. Yes, and you're all happy. Exercise is the best thing in the world. And I know that we're going to be learning a little bit more about the principles of health this afternoon and exercise. We all love to exercise, don't we? We all love to exercise. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We may not do it, but we love it. So let's see what's going to happen this afternoon. Now, I'm going to ask Pastor Neil, do you have any announcements? Yes, please come up. He's going to exercise. He's going to show us how to do 100 press-ups. No, I wouldn't make him do that. I'm not a tyrant. And I'm not going to ask him to do that. But, yeah, on another day. But, yeah, he could. He's very fit and healthy. And you can see he leads by example. Yeah, he leads by example. He does. So he sent us a program. He sent us a program for the 3 days that we're going to be in Newmarket. And the program says 6:30, we're going for a walk in the morning. So how many of us are coming to Newmarket? I'm going to Newmarket. And I looked at the program. I said, 6:30. Wow. Yes. We're going walking at 6:30. So please remember us and pray for us while we're there. He's making us do that.
You are coming on the walk at 6:30 on Tuesday morning?
Yes, I am.
Amen.
Yes, I am.
I may not be able to do press-ups. I may not be able to jog. I may not be able to touch my toes. But boy, can I walk. And I enjoy walking. Yeah. And it's good. And it's good for the soul and it's good for the health. And before you sit in a class all day or go to your work or go to your desk, to walk is brilliant. I walk most days with my dog. And that's a really good friendship and companionship. And we commune together. And, of course, I commune with the Lord together. It's just great. Now, Edith, I understand that tomorrow afternoon we've called together health professionals in Dublin. If you work for the HSC, if you work for another care organisation, if you're a nurse, if you're a doctor, if you're a paramedic, if you have an interest in lifestyle medicine, and wanting to try and make a difference where you work. Is God with us today? Yes. Is he with us on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? Yes. Do you know where the church is on a Monday morning? It's where you are and where I am. So we want to see if we can try and link creation health principles, values, with the work we do, especially in the health professional field. And the team tomorrow are going to share how this works in some other areas of the earth, planet Earth, of the world. And obviously they have the expertise of Florida Hospital right behind them. And I think you'd be very interested to hear their story. There is one story of how Creation Health is influencing the local police department where Creation Health operates. Could we ever get the guards healthy here? Now there's a thought.
Yeah. Well, I think that would be an interesting thing. I had a run-in with the guards 2 weeks ago, and yeah, and they like to chase you with their fast cars. Maybe it'd be interesting to get them to run, like physically run, right? See how fast they'll catch, how soon they'll catch us. So, but yeah, that would be really interesting. And I believe that all of us here, wherever we are working, as he says, we are called to minister. And we know that health is a bridge. It's the easiest bridge that we have found as a church to connect with people. So whether you're working with the guards or you're working in a pharmacy and you're training, yes, Carmen, or you're a chef, Cindy, or you're working in IT, Busi, everybody can impact people with this message. So if you are available tomorrow, please make yourself available, whatever care capacity you are working under, and most of us are in the caring professions. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor, nurse, physiotherapist, a chef, massage therapist, or if you're working, if you have an interest in helping others with the health message, 2:00 tomorrow in Ranelagh, we would like to see you there. I will be there, and the team will be there, and we'll be learning how we can use this to help our friends, our family members, and the people we work with, in particular in the health profession and in other areas as well. So please be there, 2 to 4 tomorrow afternoon, and and if you can't make it, now I know some of you would have loved to be in Newmarket for the 3 days, but because of work, you cannot be there. And you may not be in the health professional, you may not be a health professional, but you would have loved to attend more of the sessions. If you cannot make it to Newmarket, but can make it tomorrow, please try and be there. Thank you.
I'll take the shortcut. All right. Well, good afternoon. Did you have a good lunch? Are you still happy? Do we need to do the stretching again? Okay. You might tear your clothes or something. I know you could stretch further than you did. I know I can, but you can't do it when you're dressed up. But it was good. Kind of renewed the mind a little bit. All right, this is what we have to do today. They are setting up in here for a wedding, I believe, starting at 4 o'clock. My goal is for us to be done at 3:45, so you have time to pick up your children, and we can honor our agreement with the hotel. That being said, I know that this is the afternoon, and it's Sabbath afternoon, and it's a little bit warm in here, so here's what you can do. If you need to stand up or along the walls, do it. If you want to get a drink to stay alert, do it. If you would like to use the facilities, the toilet, do that. There isn't anything you're going to do this afternoon that's going to throw me off. So I want you to be comfortable so you be fully engaged up here as we cover 2 principles. We're going to cover 2 of the most requested Creation Health principles, and they are relationships. Spend about 15 minutes on that, maybe 20, and then outlook. And I hope that both of those are a blessing as we continue over the next hour or so. Also, I want to let you know, Creation Health was designed, and the medical professionals and those who gather with us tomorrow will hear more of the specifics and practicalities of Creation Health. It was designed for anyone in this room who wants to teach Creation Health in their church or community can do it. It was written so those of us who are non-clinical have the information we need and tools we need to conduct these seminars in the community. So many of the slides I'm sharing this afternoon, almost all of them except maybe 3 or 4, come with the Creation Health Seminar Kit. So what I'm doing this afternoon, you actually would have at your disposal to do in your Creation Health seminars. So there are two things happening here today. I'm teaching you these two principles, but know that in learning these principles, this is something that you could do and do very easily once you became familiar with the content. Make sense? Because when you see the slides, what's on the PowerPoint slide in the notes section is there are speaker's notes that tells you how to explain the research that people are seeing on the screen. It's all been done for you. Pretty cool, huh? And I know that Elder Neil would like to see Creation Health being taught throughout this mission, and that's why the pastors are being taught. But with that, let's get started. Remember, I said this morning, it's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. This is going to become very important when we get into Outlook. Let's see. I think that went back to the very beginning of my presentation. I'm just going to come over here. You wouldn't have had any idea that I started in the middle of my presentation. See, I'm such a great communicator that I prepared you for that, didn't I? Let's see here. Excuse me while we take this commercial break. Here we go. Is that it? That's it. Interpersonal relationships are the sixth principle of Creation Health. Now, one thing to keep in mind with these principles of Creation Health, these are universal principles for whole person health. Principles that people all over the world have a need for, and they relate to mind, body, and spirit. Dr. Dean Ornish, he's known in the United States for reversing heart disease. This is an amazing quote from this man. You can Google him, you'll find tens of thousands of pages on his work. You would think that he would say the number one thing to reverse heart disease would have something to do with diet and nutrition. Wouldn't you think? I mean, that would make sense, this man. You know what this medical professional says? He's not aware of any other thing in medicine, not diet, smoking, exercise, stress, all of those things, that has a greater impact on our quality of life, incidence of illness, and premature death from all causes than does friendships, social connections. That's why I say, nutrition and exercise, they are important. Now, in my humble opinion, and it's just my opinion and my perspective, of the 8 principles, of the 8, I would rank them 7th and 8th. Because what I've seen in people's lives and the research is God designed this system where if you might not be eating the way that you feel you should or exercising as much as you think you ought to be exercising, there are some compensating factors in this system that will work to your advantage. Now, we should be eating well, we should be exercising, but sometimes we only focus on the eating and the exercising. Have you heard a lot about eating and exercising? Me too. That's why we're focusing on other things in Creation Health. 1/3 of people report feeling lonely. 1/3. Not sure that's true for this room, but if it were, that would probably be about 30 to 40 people. Loneliness, I was shocked to find out, is being classified as a disease. A global disease. In fact, in America, in the United States, 1 in 4 people have no one to confide in. That means in our country, 1 out of every 4 people we pass on the street is what we'd call socially bankrupt. They have nobody in their life to lean on or rely on. I'm not sure that's the case here in Ireland, because it seems like you are a friendlier nation. A little bit? Okay. I shared this morning for those of you who are here. A sense of loneliness and isolation increases the risk of premature death by up to 500%, because I told you loneliness is a kind of what? It's a disease, it's a kind of pain. What do people try to do with their pain? They try to get rid of it, but as we saw this morning, many people, they feel trapped. They don't see any pathway out. So if you have a pain that you can't get rid of, what do you try to do to that pain? You try to numb it. And here's how people are numbing it. Abusing drugs and alcohol, smoking, overeating, overworking. Now this is interesting. In the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I know we have some guests here. In the Seventh-day Adventist Church, it seems like amongst the workers, overworking is held up as a badge of honor. Sometimes you're listening to conversations amongst church employees, and it's like one's trying to outdo the other one with how much he or she is working. But we need to remember, workaholism, it's not a value to embrace. It's actually harmful to the body. Workaholism though might be used by some employees to mask some other pains in their lives. You see? So if you have a challenge with workaholism, ask yourself, what is it? What is it in your life you think that you're using workaholism to distract yourself from? and then figure that out and start working on it, repairing it or healing it. Depression is something that causes, ups the risk of premature death. About depression, I want to say something about Edith. She mentioned about exercise. We would cover this in the seminar, but research shows that one bout of physical activity, one exercise session of physical activity will lift depressing thoughts for up to 4 to 6 hours. So if you tend to be depressed or discouraged about something in your life, really a walk in the sunshine for 20 or 30 minutes will chase those thoughts away for 4 to 6 hours. In fact, in studies they found that exercise is as effective, if not more effective, in treating patients with depression than is going to therapists and taking antidepressants. So although we've heard a lot about exercise through the years, it really is one of the best gifts you can give yourself to maintain mental health as well as physical health. This research study absolutely astonishes me. It was a government study. Actually, I think it's still ongoing in the United States, and I have to read it to you. For 40 years, you need to know that many of the studies used in Creation Health are studies that lasted 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. These aren't just short studies used by Loma Linda University over the course of 6 weeks or 2 months to try to prove our point as faith-based people, okay? These are long, long studies. And in this government study, it said that when it comes to being healthy and maintaining your health, well, let me just read it to you. This is a very long sentence from this research, and then we're going to paraphrase it. It says, social connection helps prevent premature death. So we're talking about meaningful connections, friends. It is a more powerful predictor of health and longevity, now listen, than age, gender, race, social economic status, self-reported physical health status, and health practices such as smoking, alcoholic beverage consumption, overeating, physical activity, and the utilization of preventative health services, as well as a cumulative index of health practices. What that is trying to say, and it's comprehensive in its statement, that's why it's putting all of those words in there, it's saying, if there's one thing you could do today to be healthy or be healthier, go make friends. Really, I guess that shouldn't be so surprising because God, when He created us as social creatures, right? I like what Des Cummings says. He says, in 6 days, God created life. On the 7th day, He created love. And He really created us to be in that relationship of mutually transacting love with each other. All right. When you look at 100-year-olds, for commonalities, this is what you find. They are active. They're socially connected. You'll have to look long and hard to find a 100-year-old who has no friends. They just don't exist. They typically don't smoke, they eat healthy, they get their rest, and they have a purpose. Some of you weren't in the room this morning. You know the answer. What's a better predictor of positive aging? Low cholesterol at 50 or a happy marriage? Happy marriage. For those who are eating well and trying to lower your cholesterol, it doesn't seem fair, but it's an example of how God designed the system to compensate for areas where they're not where they should be. So, power of touch. When we look at interpersonal relationships, touch is one of them. Touch amongst human beings, touch amongst pets. This is fascinating. They took infants who were born prematurely, and what they found was the only thing they did to these infants was the nurses in the intensive care unit stroked their arms and their legs for 15 minutes, 3 times a day. They found that the infants that they stroked their arms and legs for 15 minutes a day, they gained 47% more weight. They developed faster, they got healthier more quickly, they were in the hospital 6 days less, and they saved their family $3,000 on average. Just by touch. And that tells us that as people come into our lives, whether it's at church or school or wherever it might be, as to the degree that it is appropriate, one of the healthiest things you can do, one of the most medicinal things I suppose you could do is put your arm around them and let you know that you love them. And acknowledge them and let you know that they're there and that they matter to you. You don't have to have all the answers. People just love being touched by someone they know loves them and cares for them. Power of human touch. In fact, there's a story that made national headlines. 2 little baby girls named Kiri and Brielle were born 12 weeks too soon. Our son was born a month too soon, and that was stressful enough for me. I can't imagine being a parent whose children were born 3 months early. Kiri was doing well. She slept most of the time. Her blood oxygen levels were good, and she was gaining weight just as she should. But her sister, Brielle, was not doing well. Blood oxygen levels were not where they should have been, and she wasn't gaining weight. She was actually wasting. And the nurse in charge knew that the outcome for Brielle probably wasn't going to be a positive one. Now, lucky for these little girls, that nurse had just attended a seminar. It wasn't a Creation Health seminar, but she attended a seminar where they talked about the power of touch. So she went to her hospital administrator, and although it was against hospital policy nationally in the United States, she said, "Would you mind if we put both girls in the same incubator?" And the hospital administrator said, "If you're sure that one of them isn't going to make it, and as long as you get the permission of the parent, the hospital will give you the approval to put them in the same incubator." So she broke the news to the parents. It was very difficult to do, and obviously a parent will do whatever they need to do to save their child. They said, put them together in the same incubator. They did, and immediately Kiri put her arm around her little sister. Wasn't prompted to do so. Her arm wasn't placed there. She just did it voluntarily. And within hours, Brielle's blood oxygen levels started going up to where they became normal, and every day after that, she gained weight until she caught up to where her sister was. And both little girls were discharged from the hospital, healthy little girls with a bright future. And because of that situation, it changed hospital policy in the United States, where now they will put infants together in the same incubator because they know the power of touch is a compensating factor to help them grow and become strong. The power of human touch. We find the same effect to some degree, believe it or not, with our pets. In fact, you just think about this for a minute. I am always blown away when I see this. 1 year after being hospitalized with chest pains or a heart attack, only 6% of the pet owners died compared to 28% of the patients who did not own pets. This finding was independent of disease severity, exercise, or other known factors. So what made the difference to those folks who didn't die was just having a pet in their home that they could touch, that they could have that connection to. Isn't that amazing? They took some men who had problems with high blood pressure, and they were testing the effects of dogs versus the effects of their best friends in their treatment for that condition. Which one would have a greater effect, a greater positive effect? Now, what do you think had a better, greater positive effect on those men with high blood pressure? Their best friends or the dogs? It was the dogs. Why do you think it was the dogs? Yes? The unconditional love. See, even though the friend was a best friend, that friend was still perceived as a person who might have an opinion, maybe even a strong opinion about the situation, where the dog had no opinion at all. They just loved the guy. And that connection helped those men battle their disease better than just even a friend would. So, in our Creation Health seminar on interpersonal relationships, we go about 45 minutes to 55 minutes. There's a DVD that comes with each one of these presentations. I'm not taking time to show them today, but just so you know, as a commercial here, we have a medical expert that we filmed teaching 15 minutes or so on each of these principles. And that expert goes into the I guess you'd say the medical point of view of each of these principles, so it takes kind of the heavy lifting off of you and me as non-clinical. Then after that DVD is done playing, you would show these PowerPoints. And so I just wanted you to know that there's even more in the kit than I had said before. Tips for healthy relationships. I got to take a break. There's something going on with my throat. Excuse me. All of these make sense, 1 through 8, but there's one I want to focus on for our purposes here. It's number 8. If you want to have healthy, satisfying, fulfilling relationships, you have to decide today you're not going to play fair. Now, when it comes to relationships, of all things, we typically play fair, don't we? If you give me the cold shoulder, I'm going to give you the cold shoulder. If you say bad things about me, I'll say bad things about you. If you kind of avoid me, I'll avoid you. If at church our families are fighting, you sit up there in the front, I'm going to sit as far away from you as I can in the back, opposite corner. When it comes to relationships, we tend to play fair. But if you want to have healthy relationships, you have to decide right now, you're going to stop playing fair. In fact, you hear people, especially if you've been married any length of time, which is, marriage is always a challenge as the years roll on. And, couples end up treating each other how they treat each other, mirroring that behavior. But let me ask you, you hear people complaining all the time, hey, I want more affection in my relationship. And so my spouse isn't as affectionate as they ought to be, I think, and so I'm not going to be as affectionate. But let me ask you, what is one guaranteed way to have more affection in your relationship? Give more. Be more affectionate. If you think your relationship needs more grace, more forgiveness, what's one guaranteed way to have more grace and forgiveness in your relationship? To be more gracious, to be more forgiving. We have got to be and become more of what we're aching for within our relationship. No matter how difficult it is or how scary, vulnerable it makes you feel, because we talked earlier today, it's about taking charge of our life and creating our best health. If you're just reflecting back what your spouse or your friend is doing to you, you're letting that situation control you. When you have every God-given right and the strength and the power and the grace from Jesus Christ to re-engineer, to recreate the culture of that relationship by becoming what it is that you're seeking, by being forgiving, by being loving, by being affectionate, by being hopeful. You know, the Bible talks about this, and Jesus talked about it. He called it a certain kind of rule. What was it? The what rule? The golden rule. Treat others how you want yourself to be treated. And that's just not some nice theory. That's supposed to be a core action in our lives, especially those of us who are Christians. If you want to have healthy relationships, you must decide today. You must decide you won't play fair. When it comes to relationships, here's a fact of life. Some people don't get into relationships because they're afraid they'll get hurt. Some people get out of relationships because they get hurt. You know something? If you're in a relationship with somebody, whether it's a friend, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a child, you will get hurt. It's just the way it works. It's life. So make your peace with it and decide that you're going to have a different standard for your behavior within that relationship, and you'll be surprised how things turn around and how meaningful your relationships become once again. John D. Rockefeller Jr., maybe you've heard of him, said, "Giving is the secret of a healthy life, not necessarily money, but whatever a person has of encouragement, sympathy, and understanding." He didn't make this statement when he was a young man, because in fact, he was hated when he was young. He earned his money in the oil fields starting out, and at 33, he was a millionaire. And this is back in the 20th century. He was a millionaire, and his employees hated him so much. I don't know if you have a boss that you don't care for so much, but his employees hated him, where they would hang him in effigy. They would take like a mannequin, a life-size doll of him, hang it from trees in the oil fields, and they'd light the mannequin on fire and burn it up because they hated him so much, because they felt he was exploiting them for the money, the mass wealth that he was accumulating. It was so bad that when he got to about his late 40s, early 50s, he had so many death threats from his own employees, anonymous death threats obviously, that he had to have security guards 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He became the world's first billionaire by the time he was 50 to 52, 53. But unfortunately, his doctors told him, when he's 53 years old, they said, "Mr. Rockefeller, your health is so poor because the stress from all of the hatred had affected him so deeply, he could only eat milk and crackers. The only thing he could keep down, milk and crackers. And his hair was falling out. He had alopecia. His physician said, "Mr. Rockefeller, if you have any affairs you need to set in order, we suggest you do that in the coming months, because we don't think that you'll be around to celebrate your 54th birthday." And when he heard the doctors say he wouldn't be around for his 54th birthday, that got leverage on him, and he decided he was going to make a change. So instead of living selfishly for himself from that point on, he started investing himself, his energy, and his great wealth into the citizens of this world. In fact, back in the United States, he used hundreds of millions of dollars to help hospitals, universities, missions, built libraries, started the Rockefeller Foundation. I didn't know this until I read the story. His generosity aided in the discovery of penicillin, and his contributions to medicine enabled researchers to find cures, not just medicine, but cures for tuberculosis, malaria, diphtheria, and other diseases. And he did a few other amazing things. So in his life, he started saying, years later, this statement that we just read a couple of minutes ago. Now, I always like to have people guess, because it's just interesting to me. Doctors told him at the age of 53 he'd likely be dead by the age of 54. When do you guess Rockefeller Jr. actually died? I'm hearing 70s, 80s, some 90s. Do you know he actually died at 98 years old? That's another, 45 years? And what he would say made the difference was social connection. Living for other people beside himself. Reaching out, connecting, giving. He would say he lived to 98 years old because he was making contributions to this world, which is one of the highest human needs that we each have. Making contributions, being generous, making this world a better place. If you want to have better relationships, in fact, I just have to tell you, we were teaching this. It's amazing. Is this microphone off? Yeah, it's off. Good, because I feel like it's picking up a hum, but it's okay. We were teaching this at a public high school in Florida, in Orlando, Florida, to public high school teachers who taught grades 9 through 12. And every week we end with people making a choice of what they're going to do in the coming week to put the principle into action. So the week later, we would debrief, and this one teacher stood up and she said, my sister and I have hated each other for years. But after hearing the Creation Health presentation on interpersonal relationships, she said, I called my sister up, didn't know if she'd take my call or not, and I said, hey, would you like to meet for coffee at Starbucks or someplace like that? And she said her sister agreed. And she said they were planning on getting together that week to renew their relationship as sisters again because of what they had learned here. So the work that you do with Creation Health might not necessarily always lead to a decision for eternity at first, but you're relieving human suffering and bringing healing to the pain in people's lives, and that's what Jesus did, didn't he? And you'll become their friend and earn their trust. If you want to strengthen your relationships, send a card. I know we do email and text, and that's nice, but it's nice to get a card in the mail or a letter. Call someone. Take them out to lunch or dinner. Hug someone. In this age, we're afraid to touch people because of all sorts of lawsuits and stuff like that. Jesus touched people everywhere he went, you know? He spit on the ground, made some mud, put on the guy's eyes. He touched. I want to leave you with this. Remember, it's better to eat Twinkies with your friends than broccoli by yourself. And I know you have Twinkies here because I saw them at the mall yesterday, a whole big box of Twinkies. Wherever you are in your relationships, I know you're just one choice away from having a stronger marriage, healthier relationships with your kids or your siblings, or a better relationship with your colleagues. Whatever that choice is for you, you got to decide it and then put it into action. We're going to move into Outlook, but before I do, I want to ask you, who here, and I don't want to embarrass you, did anyone here have the time, and we didn't have a lot of time at all, to fill out the Creation Health self-assessment yet? A couple? Was it kind of enlightening? Was it kind of what you expected, you thought you'd find? I have a million questions I want to ask you, but I can't because I'll put you on the spot and I embarrass you. I won't do that. So I'll just embarrass my coworker, Robin. No, I'm just joking, Robin. I won't embarrass you either. Okay. That Creation Health self-assessment, which everybody got this morning, not only is a snapshot of where you are, it's a snapshot of where you will end up if you don't make changes. And there are probably some areas of your life that are going really well. But if you're like most of us, we all have one or two areas that aren't going really well at all. This is the time to make those changes. Because you know what? You're not going to wake up one day and everything's automatically made right. Not going to happen. You're going to wake up 5 years from now in a worse position you are now if you don't take some action right now. So that little self-assessment is a great snapshot for where we're headed. I have a million questions I want to ask, but I'm not going to do it out of respect for you. Outlook. The Bible says, as a man thinks, so is he. What the Bible is teaching is that whatever is up here is one day or another going to find its way out to the real world. This is such an important principle, we're spending the majority of our time on it. Because people struggle with this, it seems to me, more than anything else. I love this statement. It says, watch your thoughts, they become your words. Words become actions. Actions, habits. Habits, character. Character becomes your destiny. What's the one thing we're told is the only thing we'll be taking from here to the earth made new? our character. It all starts right here. This is not Eastern mystical stuff. This is straight from the Bible. Could you turn me down just a little bit? I'm not trying to tell you how you do your job, but I'm holding back, and I don't like holding back. I don't want to yell, but thank you. A positive outlook is a gift you give to yourself, but know this, a negative outlook is a gift you give to yourself too. Whatever outlook we have is an outlook that we've received. Now that sounds kind of simple when you hear it put that way. It's actually more complicated than that. Because some of us have received outlooks, a perspective on life, that were kind of handed down to us, that were written into our internal software program years and years ago, and we don't even remember it happening. But it is a gift you give yourself. In fact, if you choose today to be an optimist, and you'll know what that means by the time we're done, you increase the amount of natural killer cells in your body that ward off disease and fight all of these diseases. I shared this morning. Optimists have a 50% decreased risk of death from all causes. If you choose to be a pessimist, you've just increased your risk of premature death from all causes by 50%. Now, would you like to decrease your risk by 50% or increase it? Decrease, right? But here's the thing. Some of us are on autopilot here with our perspective through really no choice of our own, although it's our choice, and we are arranging our lives in such a way that it's creating disease and it's shortening our lifespan. But that doesn't have to be the way it is. We can change that today. This is probably the second most important piece of information I've seen while working with Florida Hospital in the Creation Health material. It's actually a quote from Dr. Martin Seligman. Who here has heard of him? He's a leading world authority on optimism. The guy's books are wonderful. They're filled with a lot of research, so you'll have to wade your way through that, but I'd highly recommend getting his book, especially Learned Optimism. Here's what he writes. We're going to spend a little bit of time on this slide so the rest makes sense. Your habitual way of explaining bad events, your explanatory style, is more than just the words you use when you fail. It is a habit of what? Thought. Learned where? In childhood and adolescence. Aha. The outlook you have is an outlook that you got when you were a kid. Your explanatory style stems directly from your view of your place in the world, whether you think you are valuable and deserving or worthless and hopeless. It is the hallmark of whether you are an optimist or a pessimist. So basically what he's teaching us is this, and this is so true. It's your identity that determines whether or not you're an optimist or a pessimist. There are folks in this room who are raised in families where the identity that they gave to you was an identity of value and of deserving things. There are many others in this room who form the majority of us, I do believe, who are raised and were given an identity, either from the authority figures in our lives, that led us to believe that we are worthless and hopeless, that we're undeserving. If you've been raised to believe that your life doesn't matter, guess what? You tend to live that way. If you've been raised to believe that your life doesn't matter, it's going to impact every decision you make throughout the rest of your life. I mean, it's vital we understand the principle being taught here. It's that important. Because with this one change today, in the next few minutes, for those of us who've been raised believing we're worthless and undeserving, we can choose to change that right now and change the whole trajectory of our life moving on from here. This is so important. Let me show you how this works. I've gotten permission from my father to tell this story. My dad will be 82 years old in July. He's a retired pastor, and he was born in 1933. He grew up during the Depression. My dad grew up in a very violent home. His dad was mean. In fact, I was talking to my aunt, and these past few days, spent a lot of time with her, and she said her dad had the reputation of being the meanest man in town. This is my dad's father, my aunt's father. Grew up in upstate New York, right on the Canadian border. He was born and raised in a little town called Lyon Mountain, Lyon, New York. He said his dad put a few towels down by the stove, and that's what my father's bed was. Some days they wouldn't have any food at all, and his dad was always mean. I can't imagine ever being mean to a child. It's something that's totally foreign to me from a father's point of view. But that's the life of my father. It was so bad, and according to Dad, his father was just as mean to his sister Carol. It was so bad that when Dad was like 8 years old or 9 years old, his father had taken them to a cabin on a lake. My dad's father was a volunteer fireman, and he also worked in the mines. In upstate New York, in that area, they would go 2,000, 3,000 feet underground, and they would mine iron ore. My whole family on Dad's side are iron ore miners. And so they were kind of a rough family anyway, kind of tough, calloused, not a lot of grace. And so his father took him to this cabin. The firemen each got to stay in the cabin 1 week every year during summer for their work for the town. And my dad decided he wasn't going to put up with being abused any longer. So what he did was, there was this rowboat down at the lake, and he took Carol, who was, I don't know, she's 77. She's probably 3 or 4 years old, and he put her in the rowboat. This 7 or 8 year old kid gets in the rowboat, and he stays along the shore, but he rows that boat up to his grandparents' house. They were a few hundred yards away, and they lived on the lake. And we call them Mim and Pip. It's a French thing, so I'll refer to them as Mim and Pip. My great-grandparent, my great-grandmother and great-grandfather. So he goes to Mim and Pip's. He has Carol with him. And they go up and they tell Pip everything that had been happening at home. And Pip had no idea how they were being treated. Well, later that day, Dad's father obviously figures out the kids are gone. His children are gone. And Dad said he can still hear the wheels, the tires on that car squealing their way up to Mim and Pip's house. And he knew his dad was coming for him. So Pip knew it too. He went out to the shed, got a shovel, he went out to the driveway, and as Dad's father was driving in, he came in angry and fast and mad, and iron ore pebbles were scattered all over the place. As he came in, Pip took that shovel, drew a line in the sand, and my dad's name is Norman, and his father's name is also Norman. He said, "Norman, you cross that line, you're getting this shovel across the head." Now, no one knew that... I didn't know Pip very well. I was so young. But Dad said he was the strongest man he'd ever met because he worked in the mines too, and his biceps and arms were the size of some people's legs. Just a tough guy. And so Norman, the meanest man in town, Aunt Carol told me this week, didn't say a word. He just turned around, got back in that car, and drove off. And didn't want anything to do with the kids after that. So Dad fled to a place that he thought would be safe, because he was going to family, he was going to Grandma and Grandpa. It wasn't long after being there, he said he was going down to the kitchen one morning, and he overheard one of the kids. Now, it's a strange family because Grandma Mim, she had like 10 or 11 kids, all kinds of ages. There were kids old enough to be parents, like my dad's father, okay, maybe 3 or 4. And then there were a bunch of them still at home, 4 or 5 still at home. They were young enough to still live there. Spectrum of ages. He overheard one of the children telling his grandmother, "Put them in a home. There's no room for them here. Put them in an orphanage. There's no room for them." They never knew that he overheard. But here he had one of his family members, a young kid, campaigning, trying to influence his grandmother to get rid of him and Carol. So he fled one situation where he was being abused, both, he and Carol were being abused, and he goes to his grandparents' house to try to find safety and protection, and what does he find? He finds that the family doesn't even want him there. And he told me, he said he grew up in that home not knowing whether on any given day, if this would be the day that Mim would put both, he and Carol into a car and drive them to the state institution and leave them. His own family. Now, lucky for him, Mim was a God-fearing woman. In fact, she studied her Bible so much, she started keeping the seventh-day Sabbath long before she had ever even heard about a Seventh-day Adventist church. And so she never took them to an orphanage, but Dad had to work for himself. He was never given anything. He had to earn everything from a little kid all the way up to adulthood, whether it's his clothes or whatnot. But let me ask you this. So you're a kid who's being abused by your family. You escape to your grandparents' house. You hear your family members in that house telling your grandmother, "There's no room for them here, put them in an orphanage," and you hear it on more than one occasion, kids trying to get rid of you. What do you think that does? Do you think that imparted to my father a sense of being valuable and deserving? Or do you think he just might have grown up feeling worthless and hopeless? And really undeserving, because although he was family, they didn't want him there. So he wasn't even deserving of those family gifts. Dad grew up feeling worthless and hopeless, and there was a time, and he's heard me teach this a lot, there was a time, guaranteed, when Dad and I got together, we were alone in the car, I knew at some point during the vacation, I would hear the story. The tape would play about how his father was mean, about how he took Carol and fled, and how Mim and Pip raised them, and how he heard this over and over. You know, we're talking a man in his 70s, now 82, hurts right here. You know, and it's an amazing thing. It sticks with you. But it doesn't just happen with our families making us feel unworthy and undeserving. You know what? It happens in other ways too. Other authority figures impart this idea, this belief. They impart this identity to us that we accept because we're kids and we feel like they know what they're talking about, and so we accept it. But you know what? I want to tell you, as we go on today, if that was an identity imparted to you by some authority figure in your life and you've been living with it, you don't have to live with it anymore. Because I'll tell you what your real identity is in a minute. But there are other people who shape this in us, and this is how it works. Growing up, Dad would go on to be a minister, and it's really an amazing thing. He loved God, he loves people, and so he went into the ministry. It turns out, one of his top gifts, working with people. You wouldn't think it'd be one of his top gifts, but it was his top gift, was working with people and encouraging them. I guess because he felt he didn't want them to go through what he went through. And so he would be a Bible worker at Crusades, and he would make friends with 50 or 60 people who wanted to give their lives to Jesus Christ. And he went into the ministry and pastored many churches through the years. I remember as a kid in Beaumont, Texas, the state of Texas, on the Gulf of Mexico, coast of Gulf of Mexico. One night at prayer meeting, there was an elder in the church who was praying. And I had already been raised. I mean, I had good parents. Mom and Dad, we never went without a meal. We never went without clothes. There isn't anything they wouldn't do for us. I had loving, caring parents. Please understand that. But I've been raised with this sense of unworthiness. Because you can only give what you have, right? And my father had that, and that's what he passed on to me. That night at church, I heard this elder pray. I still remember his prayer, and it must have been 40 years ago, 39 years ago when he prayed this. He said, "Dear Lord, we are worth less than the dust that's under our beds. We are unworthy and undeserving of you and your love." And I'm thinking, great, I thought I was pretty undeserving as it was. Didn't know it was as bad. I didn't know the dust under the bed had an advantage over me with God. Now there's something I'm even worth less, and it's the dust. And this is a man, I know what he's trying to say, and you do too, but what he did was he reinforced this identity in me that I'm worth nothing. And the church has done this, not intentionally, but unintentionally. So if you're a leader in the church, you need to know that kids look up to you. They're listening to the language that you use. So think it through carefully. Because you would never want a kid to believe that you're telling them that they're worthless, would you? Because here's the truth of who we are. The Bible says we're created a little what? Lower than the angels. We're children of God, fearfully and wonderfully made. And when we call ourselves junk and worthless and undeserving, I need to let you know you're breaking your Father's heart. I know that we relate to God from the perspective of a prodigal. I mean, how can we do anything other? We all know what it's like to be prodigals. So in that sense, we are unworthy. But here's the thing. The game changer is this. As I said this morning, Jesus is inviting everybody in this room to relate to God not as the almighty, omnipotent ruler, which he is, creator of this earth. Jesus Christ, through his death on the cross, has made us the very children of God. The adopted children of God, heirs to the throne. Not that we're seeking equality with God, not that we're saying we are God, but Jesus infused into us a high sense of value. Some of you still aren't getting it, so I'm going to share this with you. Let's say when I get home really, really late next Friday night. And Jennifer's already gone to Columbus or someplace doing a concert somewhere. So Garrison and I will have Sabbath together. We'll go to Sabbath school. And in the afternoon, we'll probably take a walk or something outside. Let's just say that let's say he's outside at the house, and I notice, even though he's not supposed to be in the street, he's in the street and a car is coming, and it looks like it's going to hit him. And I race to save his life. Let me ask you, was he worth saving? Yes. So these aren't trick questions. if in saving my boy, my 7-year-old son, I push him out of the way, but I get hit by the car and lose my life, was he still worth saving, my son? Yes. Was he still worth saving even though he wasn't supposed to be in the street in the first place? Yes. And that's grace. We weren't supposed to be in the street in the first place. And Jesus looked at us and he said, "You're worth saving because you're my son. You're my daughter." Amen. It is time we heard it. Yeah, I actually get pushback sometimes when I share these principles because people feel uncomfortable about it, but I know there are people like me who are trapped in here thinking that they're worth nothing, they deserve nothing, and they're completely void of any value at all. And that is a lie. It's a lie that the enemy of this world wants you to believe. You are the child of God. He did whatever it took to save your life. He loves you and thinks you're worthy enough of saving, even though it cost him his own life. If Jesus never would have resurrected from the grave, salvation wouldn't be here for us, but he still would have gone to the cross for us because we were worthy of being saved. We are unworthy of such love and grace. I get it. We all know what that means. You know, the prodigal son wanted to be a servant in his father's home, but we don't define our relationship with God based on the prodigal son. We define our relationship with God based on how the Father wants to shape and steward this relationship. You see? All right. Your identity is that you are valuable and you are deserving and you are worth something. Now, some of you had parents and authority figures who gave that to you, but many of you don't. And here's the thing. As awkward as it feels, you can decide today that you're going to choose to live by your new identity, the one that Jesus Christ is inviting you to take and receive into your life. It will be a process over time where it anchors into your life, but you can still make that choice and that decision right now. I know it's difficult, and here's why I know. In the late 70s, around 1978, 79, believe it or not, Dad's father reached out to him and wanted to make up. And I remember going over there to Thanksgiving dinner. Dad worked in Canada at the time, and it was kind of. I look back on it now, and I see that it's kind of strange. They shook hands. There were no hugs. And but his father invited us in around the table, and his father, ate certain foods that we didn't feel comfortable with. But so he had a turkey and things like that. And I remember that we had 2 Thanksgivings with him. And I remember my grandfather, summer of 79, he was so excited we were there. And he took us to Lake Placid. Have you heard of Lake Placid, New York, where the 1980 Winter Olympics were held? As it turns out, my grandfather was known to be a master craftsman. He could weld anything, calculus, he knew all that stuff. Well, the French came into Lake Placid, and they saw the mountain that they were planning on using for the Olympics. And the French said, there is no way that mountain can be used for the luge run. And I don't know how they got my grandfather's name. They brought him in, and he said, sure, won't be a problem at all. So the French just kind of sat back, and we're going to watch and see what happened. He started a team at the top, started a team at the bottom, building this luge run that he designed, and they met in the middle. It was perfect, and they used it for the Olympics. And he was so excited to share us. He's like a little kid sharing that with us as we sped along those Adirondack Mountain narrow roads up to Lake Placid. I can still see him in that blue Oldsmobile right now, riding with him and Dad. I was in the front seat with Dad. Later that fall, he was welding some galvanized steel. He was a chain smoker as well, and the physician said these fumes, some fumes from the galvanized steel that he was welding got trapped up underneath his welder's helmet. And they said that was the catalyst for starting a cancer, chain reaction of cancer throughout his whole body. And by the time the doctors diagnosed him, there was no chance of him being saved. So this is 1979, and Dad had a choice. He could go up and talk to his dad. Dad was a pastor. Mom worked with him. She didn't have a job of her own. She felt her job was supporting Dad. She went visiting with him as appropriate and things like that, so there was no money. And he had to decide, does he go to talk with his dad before his father passes, or does he wait and go for the funeral? Well, there really is no choice here, right? So he goes up to see his dad before his dad passes, because the funeral is for closure, but whatever needs to be said can't be said at that point. And he walks in and he said, I didn't even recognize my father. He had lost half his body weight from the cancer, and he had one of these oxygen things to help him breathe. It was a Sabbath afternoon, and near the evening hours, his father said, "Junior," because my dad's name was also Norman, "Junior, come into the bedroom with me." And so he went into the bedroom with his father, and his father got into the bed, and he said, "Junior, lead me in worship." Don't know where that came from, all of these years. And I asked Dad at Christmas time when he was at our house, I said, what did you read? What did you do? I've always wondered, but I'd never asked. He was so shocked that his father asked him to lead him in worship that he doesn't even remember what he read or what he did. He said, "I just took the Bible and started reading something." After he read whatever he was led to read, he asked his father, he said, "Dad," he said, "all of this fighting and hatred, what does it matter now?" And his father said, "It doesn't mean anything, and I am so sorry for hurting you." And Dad felt an opportunity there, and he said, "Dad, would you like to give your heart to Jesus Christ?" And I can't imagine how hard this would have been for Dad. But his father said, "I would like that very much." And so Dad led him, his father, to Jesus Christ. And I believe that if Jesus can save the thief on the cross, he can save my grandfather. And then I'll get to know him one day. So although the story has a very encouraging ending, and although there wasn't a physical healing, there wasn't a cure, there was a healing between father and son, and there was a healing between son and father. And despite all of those things that took place, that miracle of grace, guess who continued living his life feeling worthless and hopeless? My dad. That's how deeply ingrained this gets into people's souls. It becomes their identity, and they don't even know it. But I'm hoping to raise an awareness today that you will know it so that you can change it, because you don't have to be trapped or imprisoned in this anymore. Let's move on. This should make more sense now. When you test optimists and pessimists, optimists always outperform people's expectations, even though they might not have the grades or skills. Pessimists, although they might have the academics, they never test at the level of expectation. So if you want to have an edge in life, you've got to be an optimist, which starts here that you're worthy and deserving. Gets even better. Here's where it really comes into focus. Let's look at this. A pessimistic person says, well, success is because of luck or some work that other people did. Failure? Well, that's because of my personal faults. They internalize the failure because that's their identity. You understand now? Crisis is an overwhelming obstacle, something they can't get through. And here's the most important bullet point. They feel lack of control over life. To put it in another word, a pessimist feels like life controls them. And so what they do is they live a life of reaction. They never take action because they can't. They don't feel they have the power. You see what I'm trying to... Is this making sense to you? Okay. So if you feel today that life is in charge of you and you're living a life of reaction, you're a pessimist. You might be using the best language, the most positive thoughts, but if at your core you feel life is in charge of you and you're living a life of reaction, you're a pessimist. And what that means is somewhere along the way, someone gave you the identity of a person who is worthless and doesn't amount to anything. And you get to change all of that in a second right now by saying, I am worthy, I am deserving, because Jesus Christ loves me and redeemed me. You can start making that shift right now. It's not easy, but you can make it. An optimist says, hey, if I have success, it's because I worked for it. I earned it. Failure, well, that's the result of somebody else or bad luck. They're not casting blame, but they're not internalizing the failure. Do you see the difference? Crisis is a temporary challenge that they actually get excited about because they're going to find a new way of doing things. I remember at the hospital, whenever I heard our CEO say, we're facing a challenge rich with opportunity, I go, oh no, there must be some big problem they're dealing with. You know, the thoughts of a pessimist boiling over. Optimist feels that he or she is in control of life. And because they feel in control of life, they're constantly taking action. Now, can we control everything in our lives? No. But we talked about this morning, the one thing we can always control is the meaning we attach to that situation. So you can't control all of your situations, but you can control what every single situation in your life means to you. That's a gift from Jesus Christ. It's a blessing. So you have to ask yourself, is life in charge of you, or are you in charge of life? You can have it whichever way you want now, because now you know. Let's get into the mind-body connection. In a 20-year study, they wanted to see what effect, if any, worry would have on risk of heart attack. In 20 years, they found that those who rarely worried, risk of heart attack pretty low. Those who worried high, it was 250 times higher. Now let me ask you this. Is worry a choice? Worry is a choice. You know what worry is? Worry is faith working in reverse. Worry is faith working in reverse. You don't have to worry. Let me ask you this. Is God worried about anything in your life right now? Then should you be? If God's not going to worry about it, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm at an age where I don't have the energy to spend on stuff like that anymore. I'm 48 going on 49, and I'm sick of worrying about stuff that my Father in heaven doesn't lose sleep over, so why should I? Laughter in your heart. They took a group of men who had heart attacks, and the risk of having subsequent heart attacks is quite high once you've had one, according to the research. And what they did was they did two groups. One group had quiet time each day. The other group watched funny videos every day for 30 minutes or an hour. At the end of 12 months, the group that watched funny videos, of their group, only 2 had heart attacks. The group that had quiet time, 10 had heart attacks. They were really kind of curious about this, and this is what they found. When they started the study, both groups of men had the same cortisol levels. The blue line is the quiet meditation group. The yellow line is the funny video group. And that spread of about, 50 points, 40 points, is the difference between 2 heart attacks and 10. Humor actually decreased the stress levels in those people's bodies greater than just quiet time. Now, we're not saying don't have quiet time. What we're trying to say is, you know what? Do all you can, and I've seen it modeled here in this nation in the 48 hours I've been here. Do all you can to see the brighter side of life. Laugh as much as you can. Make a joke of it. If you're someone who gets tense and anxious and really gets angry when somebody mistreats you, here's a new mantra you can start saying. You know, I really don't approve of what they're doing, but it's not worth stressing over. I don't really approve of them stealing my parking space, but it's not worth stressing over. I don't really approve of her sticking a knife in my back, but it's not worth stressing over. And then try to make a joke of it, and you'll see what happens. You'll be a lot healthier and happier. Laughter, they say, we laugh on average of 15 times a day as adults, but kids laugh 400 times a day. We lose 380 laughs somewhere between childhood and adulthood. And I stopped to think, well, you know, that might be true, but my son doesn't have to worry about the rent, the car payment, the fuel, the groceries, the insurance, the clothes. And if he had to worry about all that stuff, maybe he wouldn't be laughing 400 times a day either. I don't know. There are times, though, when life is no laughing matter. And in those situations, and I've been very made keenly aware of that these past 7 days, in those situations where you can't laugh, all you can find are tears, you can still have the power of hope to power you through. An amazing study took place. They find that highly hopeless patients, their disease spreads sometimes 3 times faster through the body. Hopelessness is defined as expecting a negative outcome. But we can have hope, which is expecting a positive outcome. You're not going to believe this. Dr. Norman Cousins wrote about this, and it was published in the Western Journal of Medicine a few years ago. That's why I believe it's credible. It was published in one of our premier medical journals back in the States. He was at a conference on cancer, and he overheard 2 doctors talking about the results they had had with their patients. One of them was really upset. The one that was upset was only having a 22% success rate with his patients. The other doctor was having a 74% success rate. Now, if you had cancer, which one of those 2 doctors would you want as your doctor? Yeah, I want the 74%er guy. So they were talking to each other, sharing what they were doing. As it turns out, they were doing the same thing. The same treatment, the same interventions, the same drugs. Now, in the United States, if you get cancer, oftentimes you're given a drug protocol the doctor will call EPO. It stands for etoposide, platinol, oncovin, and hydroxyurea. And he will say, because doctors don't like repeating these drugs every time they're going in to see a patient, they will say, we're giving you 4 drugs we call EPO. One night, the 74%er doctor was lying in his bed and he's wondering, why in the world am I calling this EPO? I mean, he just had a thought. He had an inspiration. And so what he did was he went to his patients and he said, we have 4 drugs we're giving to you that we call HOPE. H-O-P-E. All he did that was different from the other doctor was he flipped the acronym around. Instead of saying they're getting EPO, he said, we're giving you hope. And instilling that sense of hopefulness within the soul of his patients, that thing alone yielded a 52% greater success rate because his patients felt like they had a good shot at beating that disease. So in life's moments when you can't just laugh it off, no, you can always have hope. So practice hopefulness. And when people come into your life, whether it's your family, your church, your school, your place of business, one of the greatest things you can do for them is impart a sense of hopefulness to them. You could quite literally be saving their lives by letting them know, hey, I'm here with you. This is bad, but it's going to get better, and we're going to go through it together. Everybody in this room can do that. Ministry of Healing. I added these Ministry of Healing slides to the material because I'm usually teaching this to the community at large, not our churches. Ministry of Healing, page 241. Disease is sometimes produced and is often greatly aggravated by the what? Imagination. Many are lifelong invalids who might be well if they only thought so. Many imagine that every slight exposure will cause illness, and the evil effect is produced because it is what? Expected. Many die from disease, the cause of which is wholly imaginary. So how powerful is this thing up here, this brain, that you need to be in charge of? Who's in charge of your mind? Do you know that just watching 11 minutes of the evening news with all the negative stories sends a person into a state of what they call catastrophizing, where the sky is falling and nothing will go right or well? Who wants to subject themselves to that influence? I don't. So we've talked about the identity. We've talked about laughter. We've talked about hope. We're going to talk here just for a second on gratitude. Basically, in a 20-year study, they found people who are grateful. They're healthier on every single level. They have better friendships, higher quality of friendships. Their health is better. Everything is better. We have 2 choices every day when we wake up. Do you know what those choices are? We can choose to count our blessings or count our burdens. Which one have you been counting? If you're a former pessimist like me, it's very easy to slip into burden counting. But I don't want to do that, and I know you don't either. Ministry of Healing, page 251. Nothing tends more to promote health of body and soul than does a spirit of what? Gratitude and praise. It is a positive duty to resist melancholy, discontented thoughts and feelings, as much a duty as it is to pray. If we are heaven-bound, how can we go as a band of mourners, groaning and complaining all along the way to our Father's house? Written over 100 years ago in one of my favorite books, Ministry of Healing. Sir Francis Assisi says, if you don't have everything you want, be thankful for the things you don't have that you don't want. There's always something to be thankful for. The 4th pillar of being optimistic, besides seeing the lighter side of life, being, having gratitude and living with hope, is vision. Vision gives us purpose and meaning. The Bible says, without what? Where there's no vision, the people what? Perish. And I'm going to say, where there's no vision for your relationships perish. Where there's no vision for your emotional health, your emotions perish. We often just see this in context of the church, but we need to take it into our mind, body, and soul. Wherever you lack a vision in your life, where one does not exist, there'll be death there soon. Who gets to choose the vision for their life? You do. God gave you that gift. In fact, Eugene Lang, he is a self-made millionaire in New York City who was invited back by the 6th grade class to give the commencement address. I didn't even know 6th grade classes had graduations. So he goes back, this self-made millionaire, to Harlem, New York City, which is a very disadvantaged part of the United States, especially in the city. He had this perfect speech planned out, he said, and of those 52 6th graders, he said as he was giving his speech, not a single kid was paying attention to him. Now, it's hard to get 6th graders to pay attention anyway, but no one was listening. So he said, I put my notes aside, and he said, I did my best to retell the Martin Luther King Jr. I Have a Dream speech. And he said, I was shocked to observe that they still weren't paying attention to me. And he said, then it dawned on me. I knew what the problem was. Those kids lived in a situation and were raised in a situation where they didn't believe it was even possible for them to have a dream. So he said, I made a decision right on this split-second decision. He said, I told him, don't you think for a second that you don't have what it takes to have a dream. He said, I'm making a promise to you today. For every one of you who graduates from 12th grade, I will personally pay for your college tuition for you to go on and do whatever you want to become in life. He said, every eye was on me at that point. Now, historically, only about 25% of the 52 would graduate from 12th grade in that Harlem area, and none would go on to college. So he put together a structure where they'd receive academic support, interpersonal support, because it took more than just the promise of paying for education. They needed to have a support system to get them through. Now let me ask you, when 12th grade came, how many of those 52 kids do you think graduated from high school? Close. 48. 48 of the 52, when historically maybe 10 would have graduated before that, maybe 12. How many of those kids, from which none would go to college, of those 48 who graduated, how many do you think went on to college and he paid their college tuitions for? It was 40. He personally paid the college tuition of 40 kids, and they could become whatever they wanted. And do you know what the kids said about this when interviewed later on? They said, for the first time in our lives, we had something to believe in. We had a vision to live for. As God is our personal Savior, don't you think we are equipped to impart or help lead a person in identifying a vision for their life? Don't you think God can use you to help a person become aware of something they could live for? There are forces in this world that are stealing dreams and pointing eyes toward a future that's dark, dismal, and bankrupt of any hope. But God can use you to bring you into someone's life to turn that around and help them see something that is worth living for. It doesn't have to be something astonishingly profound, but you can help them identify something that they will live for from this day forward. The pillars of optimism, let's review, are identity, feeling and knowing and believing that we are worth something, that we are deserving, that our life matters, not because we say it matters necessarily, because our caring, loving Heavenly Father says it matters and sacrificed His own life to save us, even though we were in the street where we weren't supposed to be in the first place. Does that make sense? Do you have that component? Good. Then the 4 pillars beyond that are try to see the lighter side of life and say, I don't approve of it, and just laugh it off. Have hope when the tears flow, because there are times in life where it's no laughing matter, but because of Christ, because He conquered death and all of those things, we can always live with hope despite how dark and discouraging the journey might become at times. So practice living with hopefulness. Practice living with gratitude. Count your blessings. Every day when you get up, think of 1 or 2 things to thank Jesus for. Stop counting your burdens. Don't focus on them. And fourthly, live with vision. We're about ready to wrap this up. I got to let you know what keeps people stuck. This is the aha that will unlock it for some people in this room. Martin Seligman, the guy we started with, that quote, very amazing research he did. He took dogs, he put them in a cage, he closed the door. I hate this research project, but he did it, so I got to tell you. He electrified the bottom of that metal cage and turned the current on. So the pads of those dogs' feet were shocked. Guess what they tried to do? Do you think they tried to get out of the cage? They did, but he closed the door. So they beat their head against the door repeatedly, trying to get out, and they couldn't get out. Guess what they did? Within weeks, they put the dogs in the cage, left the door open, turned on the electricity. Do you think the dog tried to get out of the cage? Didn't even try to get out of the cage, even though the door was open. The dog would just go and lay in the corner and keep getting shocked. So what he said was, we are all born with a locus of control, which means either it's internal, where you believe you are in charge of your life, or it becomes external, where you are conditioned to believe that life is in charge of you. And what they taught those dogs was something other than the dog was in charge. That's why the dog didn't try to get out, even though the door was open, because it had tried everything it thought it could do to get out, and it failed every time. So you have people in life who have encountered severe obstacles and challenges, and they've beat their head against the wall, trying to make life better, trying to escape, trying to get out, and nothing has worked. They failed every single time they've tried, and they're all bloodied and bruised. And what they do is they go live their life in the corner, and they think that they are nothing, they're worth nothing, they have no power, and they can't make a difference in their life. So that's why I tell you when we say people know how to live healthy, why aren't they doing it? There's a reason why they're not doing it. It's much deeper than teaching someone how to stop smoking. It goes to the core. There are issues beneath the surface that God wants us to bring healing to and grace to, and we can do it through Christ's strength, who gives us power. But what they did with these dogs was, so you have people who believe, up here, they believe, yeah, I have choice, but in here, life experience teaches them they can't make a difference in their life. So they stop trying altogether. It's not because they're lazy or lack initiative. It's because they've been taught through life experience they're nothing and can do nothing. Here's what Seligman did. Thank goodness the story continues. The researchers took those dogs and they put the current on, and they would have to physically lift those dogs in the cages. They must have been big cages. And the researchers, each one of them would have to move a leg and walk the dog like a puppet toward the door and out of the cage. And they repeated that process over and over and over, moving the dog's legs so the dog wasn't moving them, to the point where they took the dog out of the cage. And then they put the dog in the cage, left the door open, turned the electricity on. Guess what the dog did? Bolted out of the cage just like that. So he said, although we can condition a creature to believe that circumstances are in control of them, we can recondition a creature to believe once again that they are in charge of life. And God is about wanting to give you your life back. That's what he aches for you and me as his children. For you to prosper and to be happy and have an abundant life and to be in charge of your life. And he wants you to be in charge of your life. Even though he's powerful enough to coerce and manipulate you and treat you like a robot, he doesn't. He honors your freedom of choice. And we willingly surrender it to him as we become one with him, but he never controls our life. You are always in charge. Does that make sense? Okay, good. We're almost done. Dag Hammarskjöld, he was in charge of United Nations back in the 60s. He was a Christian man. His plane was shot down over Africa. He said, we act in faith and miracles occur. Some of you are waiting for a miracle. You've been waiting for something to happen, and I want to encourage you this afternoon. Go meet it. When that van passed me on the road, your miracle is on the way, I had to go meet it. God sometimes, a lot of the times, most of the time, is just not going to drop a miracle in your lap. If Moses never would have stepped out, I don't think the Red Sea ever would have parted. If Moses wouldn't have walked forward, I don't think God would have magically levitated the nation of Israel across the Red Sea toward the Promised Land. You have a decision to make today. You're only one choice away from living a better life, and I don't know what it is. I want to ask you, this string of letters makes a sentence. What sentence do you see? Yeah, I'm hearing two. Opportunity is nowhere, which is the first thing I saw when I saw it a few years ago. And opportunity is now here. Now, we have a few goofy people in the audience who see opportunity is snowwhere, or here, but that's a different lecture altogether. The point is, whatever you choose to see becomes the truth for your life. And for those of us who are recovering pessimists, I was a pessimist to the core. I'm not anymore. It's a lifelong process. It's not an easy journey, but I see opportunity is now here because that's what I choose to see. Because I, like you, am worthy of opportunity. If you want to change your outlook, practice optimism, live with vision, maintain hope, express gratitude, see the lighter side of life, start with identity, as we talked at long enough, I think. Pray, claim promises. Psalms are a great place to start because David, he really went through it, didn't he? And that encourages us. And remember that your mind and body are intimately connected. There's more we could have said, but what happens here is going to affect this. What do you see now? Yeah, everybody sees the same thing now. Good. Opportunity is now here, and don't you forget it. It's not what you look at that matters, is what you see. In here, up there, out here. Wherever you are today, you're just one choice away from living a better life. You're just one choice away from living more fully the abundant life that Jesus Christ has for you. And I really hope with all of my heart you'll make that choice starting right now. Okay.
Thank you, Lionel. Where do we go from here? This is not the last time you will hear a Creation Health lecture. Amen. And I think that's good news. The pastoral team this week from across the Irish Mission, we're going to train in how to run Creation Health presentations. I would imagine that of all the Seventh-day Adventist health lectures you and I have heard over the years, we've probably not heard too many like that. Is that true? Did we touch on some core issues? We admit that we have emotions and feelings. Have your emotions and feelings ever ruled you? Have they ever ruled me? Do they sometimes still rule me and rule you? I love that emotion and feeling which says that the love of Christ controls me. I don't know what you're doing on Monday morning, or where you'll be on Monday morning or Tuesday morning, and what you'll be doing. What stress issues you will face. But I hope that as a result of today's seminar, lecture, it'll give you a spring in your step. Maybe you and I will just see the world we face, with all that it chucks at us, just a little differently from before we came into worship and heard some of the lectures today. The centre of influence that Edith and Pastor Gavin and the Ranelagh team are running right now has at its heart the value of trying to heal all of us in the church and in the community of all the sort of issues we face, so that we can truly live life at its best. Is it not right that God's last day people really are the happiest people on earth? Why not? Is it just some fantasy that some person in the 19th century suggested could happen? Or is it really possible that when you have Jesus living in your life, even in difficult times, even in end times, you and I have hope, have joy, and really celebrate the good news of what Christ has done for us? Let's pray. Heavenly Father, in these quiet moments, we thank you for speaking to us during this day. Lord, only you know the stirrings that have been prompted inside us. Only you know the joy that your Spirit has brought to us this day. May today have been a truly growing experience in our lives. And Lord, we say thank you. Amen. Thank you for being here today. Thank you to the Creation Health team. I trust you've had good fellowship, and I really do pray that you will go with a spring in your step this coming week. God bless. Bye-bye. And that your children will have be more sprightly because of the time they've had next door. Would you please go and collect them? I'm reminded. Thank you.